Welcome back. Today's topic is bilateral transactions. In the last video lecture, we have seen the classification of activities of independent system operator in bilateral markets. Now we will see what actually are bilateral transactions and what are the conditions which are to be fulfilled in bilateral markets by different participants. Moving ahead, I hope that you will be able to describe the bilateral transaction matrix by the end of this lecture. I will start with the bilateral markets because we have already seen in the video lecture, in the last video lecture, and then I will move on to BTM, normally called as a bilateral transaction matrix, followed by the conditions which are to be fulfilled, and next we will see how curtailment of transactions is done by independent system operator. First of all, we'll start with the role of ISO in bilateral markets. We have seen in the last lecture that the role of ISO is very limited in bilateral markets. He has no control over the market price, he has no control over the market clearing quantity, and he has no control over the unit commitments. He himself is limited to maintaining the system security, maintaining the system reliability, and managing the congestion, and in particular, he offers any ancillary services if required by any of the participants. So now, when ISO is nothing to do in the bilateral markets, then how these transactions are done? These transactions, energy transactions or power transactions, they will be made between the bilateral parties, and how they are modeled, this is a big question. So these transactions are basically represented in the form of a bilateral transaction matrix, which we call it as BTM, bilateral transaction. Okay, this modeling of bilateral transactions is usually through the use of bilateral transaction matrices, which denotes the linkages between various parties involved. The construction of BTM requires adhering to certain rules such as column rule and row rule, which ensures that BTM elements satisfy the basic constraints of demand-supply balance. So, assuming that it is just like our bus impedance matrix and bus admittance matrix which we have done, let us suppose this is a power system. We have seen that let us suppose this is a generator 1 and this is generator 2, and there are different loads L1. Sorry, this is bus number 1, bus number 2 and bus number 3. Okay, this is L3. And here there is a load L1, L2, and here there is a load L1. He is also supplying here, and he is also supplying here. Now let us suppose this is a sample power system. So here if we can, let's say at bus number 1, both the generator and buyer are located at the same place. Here also the generator and the buyer are located at the same place. But here there are no generators, only buyers are there. So how BTM is formulated in such a case? See, the BTM, which we call it as a bilateral transaction matrix, let us consider a system of n buses. So the order of bilateral transaction matrix is n by n, where n indicates a number of buses in the power system. So this is the representation of the matrix, bilateral transaction matrix. The number of elements is n by n. Each element, first row, first column, indicates it is generator 1 to load 1. Okay, so which means nth generator to nth load. See what I have done here. Sorry. Three loads, right? And there is only one generator here, two generators are here. So first bus, generator is there, load is there, second bus, there is a generator, load, third bus, only loads are there, and they are being supplied by generators from 1 and 2. In this case, if you carefully see, there is first generator supplying to first load. Yes, there will be a value, how much is being transaction, and from 1 to 2 it is not supplying. This is bus number 2, it is not supplying, you will get 0. 1 to 3 you may be supplying. And 2 to 1 is also not there, 2 to 2 self it is there, and 2 to 3 is there. And here 3 to 1, from 1 you are getting a power, so this is the power, and from 2 to 3 also you are getting, and 3 to 3 it is 0. So this is the way how bilateral transaction matrix And these components will be discussed in detail in the next video lecture. Now, how the rows and columns of BTM are defined. Rows, as you have seen, a particular row over a row defines a bilateral contracts of generator I with all possible loads. Thus, the first row of T matrix defines a bilateral contracts a generator at bus L may enter into loads at buses J. See, I will show you. See, this is generators 1, 2, 3, and these are loads 1, 2, 3, which means first row indicates that the contracts which are made by generator 1 with the different loads. See, this guy has made contracts with the local load and also with the third load. This is an indication. So if you see a row in the BTM, it shows that the number of transactions which are made by this generator at that particular bus with the different loads. Similarly, if I go through a column, it is the number of transactions which are made by this load in order to obtain power from different generators. This is the case if we observe a column or a row matrix. So a row always indicates a bilateral contracts of a generator. Similarly, columns, see, it defines a bilateral contracts a load at bus enters into with other generators. Okay. So the conditions which are to be fulfilled is that at bus J, the bilateral contracts at a load at bus J enters into with all the generators must be satisfying the total demand at bus J. As we have seen, see at bus number 3, okay, I'll show you. Let us suppose generator 1, 2, 3, load 1, 2, 3. As we have seen, this is generator 1, G1, generator G2 is there. Here, there is nothing is there. Load 1, load 2, and there is a load here, L3, but is being supplied by here and here. So at any column, the summation of all these must be equal to the load at this particular bus. So whatever load L3 is there, sorry, I think, yeah. So the summation of all elements in this particular column, see, this is L3, right? So whatever the G3, I think there is no G3. That's what I am more concerned about. Yeah, there is no question of any G3, so I won't be getting any G3 here. Yeah. Now see here, this L3 now, the summation of these two powers which are coming from, one is G1, the other one is G2, must be able to meet the entire demand at L3. This is the point which the condition, first condition to be fulfilled. The second condition is that whatever the generation which is offered by this generator 1 must not exceed the limits, physical limits of the generator at 1. See, the generation schedule should be within the upper and lower bounds of the generation for the unit. So whatever it is offered in a particular row, the summation of a row must not be beyond the limits of the generator. So these two conditions are to be satisfied, which means that the generation should not be violated at any machine. And the second one is loads must be met. So these two conditions are predominantly to be satisfied in all the bilateral transactions. Now, the next step which we will be discussing is, let us suppose there are huge number of requests from the different parties to the independent system operator. So there is only one line. X1 has come, X2 has come, X3 has come. Everybody wants this transmission line. An independent system operator, he is supposed to provide only to 1 or 2 persons based upon the capacity. In that case, how he will curtail the transactions. So from the perspective of ISO and bilateral markets, he has only one objective. He is supposed to ensure the system is secure and reliable. So under certain circumstances, it might be necessary for the ISO to curtail some of the transactions, because if the system is overloaded, then the system may become unreliable. So in some cases, he is supposed to curtail the transactions. And the choice of curtailment of transactions is important, because all the parties, they want complete access to the transmission lines. They don't want their transaction to be curtailed. So it may affect their financial deals. So it is always a difficult task for the independent system operator. So ISO should act in an impartial and fair manner to all parties while deciding on the curtailment of transactions. Okay, and the decision. Uh, See, the role of ISO is much less in an open access environment, and the functions are limited to verifying the feasibility to trades 24 hours ahead, monitor them in real time for system security and maintenance, and provide any ancillary services. And he has to curtail some of the transactions for system security reasons. So that's it for today. I hope that now you are able to describe the BTA, and I hope that you are able to list the conditions which are to be fulfilled in bilateral markets. And this is a lecture level question. What is significance of bilateral transaction matrix and how these elements are computed? This is the reference. Thank you.